Welcome to the Quiet Archives. Let us step back in time together to narrations of forgotten manuals and documents from the early 20th century, brought to life with authentic vintage footage. If you enjoy these retellings from the archives of history, please like and subscribe. And so, we begin. Beekeeping by Frank Benton in charge of apicultural investigations. Revised March 1905. Beekeeping. Anyone who desires to do so can learn to manipulate bees. Any person with fairly steady nerves and some patience and courage can easily learn to control and manipulate bees. There are, it is true, a few exceptional individuals whose systems are particularly susceptible to the poison injected by the bee, so much so that serious effects follow a single sting. Such cases are, however, very rare. In most instances where care is not taken to avoid all stings, the system eventually becomes accustomed to the poison, so that beyond momentary pain a sting causes no inconvenience. To a certain extent, the belief exists that bees have, without apparent cause, a violent dislike for some people, while others, without any effort, are received into their favor. The latter part of this proposition has a better foundation than the first part, for it is the actions, rather than any peculiarity of the individual himself, that anger the bees. Bees prefer, of course, not to be disturbed. Hence they usually keep guards on the lookout for intruders. When visitors approach the hives, these guards are very apt to fly toward them, as if to inquire whether harm is intended or not. And should the visitor not inspire them with fear by using smoke or some similar means, but should himself show fear and nervousness, he will be very likely to arouse their suspicions still further, or even to anger them should he strike at them or endeavor to dodge their approach. Indeed, one not accustomed to the notes of bees is very likely, unconsciously, to dodge his head when a worker buzzes uncomfortably close to his face. It may be a movement of but an inch or two, but perhaps a quick jerk, and being noticed by the suspicious guard is resented. A sting follows, and yet the recipient declares that he did nothing to cause the attack, but that bees merely hate him and always sting him when he approaches them. On the other hand, an equally unprotected person who moves about with deliberation may generally, under the same circumstances, be let off without receiving a sting. It is in this case not so much what he does as what he does not do. It is not to be understood that bees will always refrain from stinging if one remains somewhat passive in the vicinity of their hives, for the fact is that at some seasons common black bees and crosses having blood of this race fly some distance to attack passers-by, or even, without just provocation and with but slight warning, to plant a sting in the face of one who is standing near the apiary. But as the avoidance of such unpleasant occurrences depends largely upon the kind of bees kept, and to a certain extent upon an acquaintance with a few facts with which anyone of intelligence may easily familiarize himself, and the observance of certain precautions which are quite simple and after a little practice will become easy, and as the opening and manipulation of hives in securing honey, etc., is equally simple and attended with no greater risks, it is safe to say that almost anyone can, with perseverance and the exercise of due caution, learn to manipulate bees with perfect freedom and without serious risk of being stung. How to avoid stings. Stings can be avoided, first, by having gentle bees. If no other point of superiority over the common brown or black bee than that of gentleness could be fairly claimed for some of the races introduced and some of the strains developed in recent years, it would still be worthwhile to get them on this account alone. When the fact of superiority in several other important points is considered also, there should be no further question as to the advisability of procuring them in preference to the common variety. The beginner is advised never to think of doing otherwise. No one likes stings, and even the veteran who affects insensibility to the wrath of his charges will find his interest and pleasure in them much increased by replacing blacks and their crosses with better varieties. Nor is this merely to gratify a fancy or for convenience alone. If, by reason of the stinging qualities of the bees kept, an examination for the purpose of ascertaining the condition of a colony of bees becomes a disagreeable task to the one who cares for the apiary, little things necessary to the welfare of the colonies will be postponed or omitted altogether, and the apiary will soon present a neglected appearance, and the actual profits will be affected. Of the races already in general cultivation, Carniolans are the gentlest, although Caucasians, more recently introduced from southeastern Russia and only now being put on sale, are by far the least inclined to sting of any bees, and may be handled at all times without resorting to the protection of a bee veil, and generally without smoke, or at most a very slight application of smoke. Some strains of Italians equal in gentleness average Carniolans, but in general, the race native to Italy is by no means as gentle as that found in Carniola, Austria, and the Caucasians are much to be preferred for the beginner. In case these gentler races are not easily procurable, he need not hesitate, however, to undertake, after adopting due precautions, the manipulation of pure Italians. In crossing well-established breeds, the males of a gentle race should be used, otherwise the workers of the cross may vary greatly in temper, especially in the first few generations. Only careful selection continued for some time will fix the desirable traits as to result in their reproduction with a fair degree of certainty in the offspring. Bees having the blood of blacks and Italians are nearly always quite vicious in the case of the first cross, and are even harder to subdue with smoke than are pure blacks. Other races need not be considered here, as they are adapted to special purposes, and the skill of the bee master, the conditions of climate, flora, etc., and the particular line of production to be followed, should decide whether their introduction is advisable or not. The second essential to enable one to avoid stings is to have a good smoker at hand whenever the bees are to be handled. Any way of getting smoke of any kind into the hive and about it may answer the purpose, but for ease and effectiveness in keeping bees under control, nothing will take the place of the modern bellows smoker. A good one lasts years, and its cost is so slight, 1 to 125 for the medium sizes, that the expenditure may be considered one of the wisest that can be made in fitting up an apiary. A veil made of black bobbinet or Brussels net to draw over the hat, and a pair of gloves, preferably of rubber, may be used at first. But whoever has fairly peaceable bees and learns even a little about their ways will soon discard the gloves, unless, indeed, he be exceedingly timid, or one of those to whom a bee sting would be a dreadful affliction. The veil can be safely dispensed with if the gentlest bees are kept. Simple and convenient hives, employing the Langstroth principle, and with stories and frames interchangeable, and so constructed as to reduce propolization to a minimum and to ensure straight combs, will much facilitate the avoidance of stings. The use of the bee escape in removing surplus honey greatly reduces the risk of being stung during this operation, for it saves much manipulation of combs and shaking and brushing of bees. This useful device is fitted into a slot made in a board the same size as the top of the hive, and the whole, when slipped in between the brood apartment and an upper story or super, will permit all of the workers above to go down into the lower story, but not to return to the top above, to go down into the lower story, but not to return to the top one, so that in one night it is possible to free entirely a set of combs from bees, without any manipulation of the combs, and without smoking, shaking, or brushing the bees. Lastly, reasonable care and manipulation and a suitable system of management, which of course implies the doing of work in the proper season, will, with the observance of the foregoing points, make the risk of stings exceedingly slight. Indeed, intelligent attention to the most important of the points mentioned above, with extra gentleness and moderation in manipulation, will enable anyone who so desires to avoid all stings. What race of bees to choose? Reference has already been made to the relative gentleness of the various races, and since the gentler types are themselves excellent honey-gatherers, and the particular advantages to be derived from some of the more energetic races which do not happen to be so mild in temperament, are not likely to be secured by the beginner who is unfamiliar with the most approved methods of manipulation of such bees, it is strongly recommended that only the gentle ones be at first adopted, either Caucasians, Carniolans, or Italians. Should full colonies of these not be obtainable near home, colonies of ordinary bees may be changed by replacing their queens with queens of the desired race, the latter having been procured in small boxes by mail. If possible, the introduction had better be made by an expert, although in general, by following the instructions which accompany the new queen, success will also be attained by the beginner. A brief summary of the leading traits of the various races now in this country will be of use in guiding the purchaser as well as instructive to him for reference. Caucasians are natives of that portion of Russia lying between the Black and Caspian Seas, are exceedingly gentle, good workers, good defenders of their hives, prolific, build many queen cells, and swarm often if confined to small hives. The workers are dark, leaden gray in their general color, and present quite a ringed appearance because of the alternation of this dark color with the lighter fuzz which edges the segments of the abdomen. They also show frequently 1 to 2 yellow or leather-colored bands, are somewhat smaller bodied than Italians or Carniolans, have good wing expanse, and hence are nimble flyers. The drones are rather small and quite dark in color, queens not large, and vary in color from a coppery yellow to a dark bronze. Carniolans are much larger bodied and somewhat lighter gray in color than the Caucasians, but show likewise in many instances 1 or 2 rusty or dark red bands. Their great hardiness and excellent wing power enable them to fly freely in much cooler weather than some other races stand, and to regain their hive entrances under adverse conditions. They are prolific, active, and good honey gatherers, producing combs of snowy whiteness. As in the case of the Caucasians, their prolificness causes them to fill small hives to overflowing with bees, and this naturally results in numerous swarms. It is therefore advisable to use hives containing 10 to 12 frames in the brood chamber. The nature of the Carniolans is essentially a quiet one, so that upon the approach of cold weather they settle down in a very compact and extremely quiet cluster, a condition which contributes in no small degree to their excellent wintering qualities. The drones are the largest of all drones of this species, and are covered with a thick coat of gray fuzz. The queens vary from a light color to a very dark leather color, the typical queen being, however, dark bronze, large, well-rounded, strong, and active. Italians, the first of the foreign races to be introduced into this country, are much more widely known, and have with reason found great favor, since they are industrious, good defenders of their hives, and excellent honey gatherers, as well as handsome in appearance, being usually evenly marked with 3 yellow bands across the anterior portion of the abdomen. The blood has become so disseminated through the apiaries of the country that many hybrid bees having but 1 to 2 yellow bands are counted as Italians, and their cross disposition, derived through the males of the common race, is charged to the Italians. Strains of Italians pure in blood have been bred by selection in this country, until the 3 yellow bands have become so wide as to be nearly or quite joined, and in some instances nearly the whole abdomen is yellow. In general, however, as regards gathering powers, it does not seem that any improvement has been made by this selection, the dark or leather-colored Italians proving, all in all, more vigorous, gentle, and better honey gatherers, while as regards wintering they are also superior. It must be acknowledged, however, that the Italian race is slightly inferior in wintering qualities to all of the others which have been generally introduced into America. Cyprians from the island of Cyprus may be taken as a general type with which to compare other eastern races. They are small-bodied, more slender, in fact, than any of the European races of bees. The abdomen is more pointed and shows, when the bees are purely bred, 3 light-colored bands on the upper surface, and considerable yellow on the underside. Between the wing attachments on the thorax is a little prominence, shaped like a half-moon, which is usually quite plainly yellow in color. The queens are small-bodied, yellow in color, with more or less black at the tip of the abdomen. The drones have a heavy coat of fuzz on the thorax, and the abdomen presents a mottled yellow appearance, being often highly yellow. Cyprians possess longer tongues and greater wing power than other races. This, combined with great prolificness and most remarkable activity, renders them the best of honey gatherers. In temper, however, they may be regarded as rather aggressive, rendering their management by any who are not experts extremely difficult. This feature may, however, be largely overcome by crossing the queens of this race with the drones of very gentle types. In this manner, bees are produced that are readily amenable to smoke and ordinary methods in manipulation, combined with the excellent honey-gathering powers and prolificness of the eastern races. Cypriocarniolans and Cyprio-Caucasians. The author conceived the idea in the early 80s that by crossing the Cyprian and Carniolan races a type might be developed which would combine the excellent traits of both of these. The first matings of Cyprians and Carniolans were made by him in 1883 in Carniola itself, thus ensuring positively the fecundation of the Cyprian queens by Carniolan drones. Bees combining the blood of the two races in various proportions have since been tested for years in comparison with all other known races, with the result that the cross mentioned above has been found to exceed all of the pure races in honey-gathering powers, owing undoubtedly to the combination of great energy, hardiness, prolificness, and wing power, as well as greater length of tongue, a fact established by actual measurements. Similar results, with even greater gentleness, may be expected from the cross obtained between Cyprian queens and Caucasian drones, Syrian and Palestine or Holy Land bees. What has been said of Cyprians may be taken to apply in a general sense to Syrian and Palestine bees, except that in these the good qualities are slightly less prominent, while some of the bad ones of the Cyprians are accentuated. No separate description of these is therefore particularly necessary in this place. German, common black, or brown bees. The bees commonly found wild and cultivated to a greater or less extent in this country and known under the above name are probably derived from early introductions from the Old World. In comparison with the races above enumerated, they may be said to be inferior, since they possess the least energy in honey collecting, are less prolific, and not as good defenders of their hives. Under favorable conditions, however, as regards pasturage, they may be relied upon for excellent results. They are, however, spiteful under manipulation, and have the disagreeable habit of running from the combs and dropping in bunches on the ground, likewise of flying from the hive entrance and attacking passers-by. They are more easily discouraged than other bees during slack times as regards honey production, and this is doubtless the main reason for their generally inferior economic value.